This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. I'm in the club in Washington Dulles Airport on my way to another assignment, and you'll hear more about that soon. In the meantime, I just got a chance to interview Gordon Chang. He lives in New York, is an author and a columnist, and is the preeminent expert on China. And it was really an honor to have him on the podcast. This is a guy who's on Fox News and lots of other networks all the time commenting on what China is doing around the globe, their global aspirations. And we had a really good conversation. I want you to listen to it. Check it out.
Oh, if you could mention my Twitter.
Hi, folks. Chuck Holton here. Thanks for watching The Hot Zone. And we've got a very special guest today, so I want to get right to him. Gordon Chang is a columnist, author, and lawyer. He's also the author of The Coming Collapse of China. I think I got that right. And you can find him at Gordon G. Chang on Twitter. So check him out. Fascinating articles that this man writes about the Cold War, the Cold Tech War with China, and a whole lot more. So we're going to drill into that today. Mr. Chang, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Chuck. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. So let's first talk about the I guess you said it's a pamphlet or a book, the Coming Tech War with China, the Cold Tech War with China, right?
The Great U.S.-China Tech War.
Okay. Boy, I messed that one up. Okay. The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Tell me what that's about real quick.
Well, if we go back a decade or so, nobody thought China was a competitor to the U.S. in technology. And now they seem to be ahead in critical areas. The U.S. went to sleep. Also, we're just not marshaling our resources like we did, for instance, to go to the moon.
Right. And
so China right now is ahead of us. And this was graphically demonstrated to us when the Financial Times this month actually reported that China launched into orbit a hypersonic glide vehicle. It circled the Earth once and came back down. Now, it did miss its target by about 24, 25 miles or so. But the point is, they will certainly improve that accuracy with additional tests. This is a great achievement. This is something that we can't do right now. And matter of fact, we don't even have a program to put a HGV onto a ICBM and launch it around the world. So we're not even in this race.
Wow, that's incredible. And I guess if you got a nuclear missile missing by 24 or 25 miles, it isn't going to matter that much.
That's absolutely right. Because what we're talking about is deterrence. Right. And also these things can destroy in a very wide radius. And besides, they're not going to launch just one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So also artificial intelligence. I read a book about the AI apocalypse, I think that it was called, and talking about just how far ahead China is and how they are just full court press with industrial espionage, commercial espionage, military espionage, cultural espionage, you name it. They are pushing the envelope to just gather up as much data as possible to feed into these AI programs. What do they plan to do with all that data?
Rule the world. There's a couple important things here. The Pentagon's first software engineer, he resigned saying that we've already lost this race. Now, that's an exaggeration. I think that that's defeatism. But the point is that their AI technology is as good as ours, better than ours, maybe just a little bit behind ours, depending who you're talking to and depending what particular area of AI. But the one thing that's important, you put your finger on it, and that is AI systems run on data. We're a democracy. There are limits, severe limits in some cases, on the data that we could put into AI systems. China has no such limits, and China is hoovering up information from around the world. So their AI, regardless of technology, their AI is going to be much more capable than ours because of the data that they put into it.
You know, it almost seems like China's national motto should be something like, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. And if you get caught, you're not trying hard enough. uh,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because they just push the envelope in every area like that.
Yeah, there's two stories here. First of all, China, more than any other country in history, has made it a policy to steal technology. And as we know from our country, they take maybe $500 billion of IP a year. Some people say a little bit less, some people say a little bit more, but we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars a year. That's one story. Chuck, the other story, though, which is more important to Americans, is that we know about this. This has been going on for decades, and we're not taking adequate measures. And so I think that this is a story of American feebleness. And we're not just talking about the Biden administration, which is certainly feeble in this regard, but I'm talking about all of the prior administrations, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, and conservatives. They have all failed to protect America. And so the American people should be outraged what's going on. Yeah, they should be outraged at the Chinese, but we should assume that they're villains. What we should be outraged about is something that we should not assume, but which is actually true. And that is, we've got a series of presidents who had the means to protect us, who chose not to do so.
Amazing. You probably cover this in your book about the coming collapse of China, but it just seems to me like it's almost a self-defeating strategy to try to destroy your largest customer. And isn't that kind of what China's doing?
Well, yes. I mean, that's long term. And short term, though, this is having an effect because Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, is not just trying to destroy his largest customer, because he is trying to do that. But he's closing China off, and he's going back to policies that would be familiar with Mao Zedong, who founded the People's Republic, who instituted first Stalinist industrialization and then crazy economics. And so Xi Jinping is turning his back on the liberalization that was made China so successful. That liberalization was, first of all, sponsored by Deng Xiaoping, who was Mao's successor, and by Deng's successors, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao. So really what's happening is China is committing national suicide with its policies that go back to an earlier era, policies that clearly didn't work then and certainly are not going to work in a more modern time.
But in the short term, it's very, very bad for the United States. It's, right.
In the short term, well, there's a lot of consideration short term. In the short term, what we are seeing are, for instance, China going after foreign companies, but he's also going after domestic private entrepreneurs. And yes, we are hurt by China's actions against our businesses, but on balance, China is hurting itself far more than it's hurting the United States. So even on a short-term basis, this is a good story for the West and for the United States. Longer term, it'll be an even better story. Remember, China is less important to the international financial system and the international economy than most people believe. You will hear almost everybody say China is the engine of global growth. Well, that's not true. China had, not now, but China had a lot of growth. But the point is, to be an engine of global growth, you've got to buy the goods and services of other countries to create growth elsewhere. China, through criminal and predatory policies, was actually taking growth from other countries. So if China were, for instance, to one day disappear down a black hole, I mean, those predatory and criminal policies would disappear too, and we'd be doing a lot better. Remember, this could be $600 billion of US IP a year, according to some estimates. Maybe a little bit less, as I said, but if China were to stop doing that, that would be a tremendous boon to the US.
Wow. So that's actually kind of a hopeful take on that. I like that. How does the Belt and Road Initiative fit into their long-term plans? Like if you were going to explain the BRI to a sixth grader, how would you do that? Because it's a pretty complicated, complex plan, I think.
Well, since I got a sixth grade mentality, this will be pretty easy for me. Belt and Road is China's plan to build infrastructure to tie the world to China. And what China's doing is building roads, railroads, ports all over the world. And what I would say to a sixth grader, which is not apparent to China's leader, is that China is building a lot of infrastructure that the world is just not economic. And so there's a question.
I'm sorry, aren't they trying to curry favor by doing this? It seems like here in Panama, that's kind of their plan, is to make Panama beholden to them by giving them bridges and roads and things like that. Kind of like Venezuela did with all their oil before the oil ran out. They gave away oil to everybody to try to make friends. Is that kind of part of the plan?
That is the plan. And you put your finger on something really, really important, and that is that this, on the part BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, is really imperial overstretch. And so China can do this for a little while, but we are starting to see the money run out. And in Beijing itself, they don't talk about Belt and Road in the glowing terms that they once did 2-3 years ago. Because remember, China right now has a critical debt crisis. And we hear about the property company Evergrande, which owes by itself $305 billion, Chuck. But Evergrande is not the only big debtor in China. And we've had 3 other companies miss their bond payments. So this really is a problem for China, because you've got debt, not just in the property sector, but throughout China, and not just the private sector. We're also talking about governments and government institutions. So China right now has a debt crisis. At the same time, it has the rolling power outages. It's got a food crisis, environmental crisis, COVID-19 crisis, and a stumbling economy. They reported 4.9% growth in the third quarter of this year, year on year, but probably it's a lot closer to zero.
Okay, folks, that's all we've got for today, but the second half of this interview is coming up next time. So stick around, because you're going to want to hear the rest of the conversation with Gordon Chang. I'm Chuck Holton. Thanks for watching.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.